Because it scares. It scares.
It makes me jump. It doesn't scare me. It makes me sound like a wimp.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. I'm tempted. I was told not to bang the gavel because it scares one of our members. This evening's Planning South Committee. I am Councillor Len Ellis-Brown, and I shall be chairing this evening's meeting. I shall be supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor Lambert, and the professional officers. Thank you for attending. May I remind members of the public, this is not a public meeting, but a meeting in which the public are invited. Therefore, it's not a forum for the public to ask questions, challenge the points raised during the debate by the officers and members of the committee. You must not engage with the members or call out during the meeting. If you have requested to speak, when invited to do so, please keep to your allotted time. Your comments should be material in planning terms to the decision being considered. I'm not expecting a fire drill today, so should you hear the alarm, please make your way to the nearest fire exit, which is on the left and behind me, and then make your way to the assembly point, which is in the centre of Horsham. Please can council members and members of the public switch off their mobile phones or turn them to silent. And remember to turn microphones on before speaking and then turn them off when you've finished. I would also remind everyone this evening that this meeting is being live streamed and to behave accordingly. In particular, please show respect to one another. When members are voting, make sure your arm is clearly raised so that the officer can capture an accurate count. And before we proceed, please could the officers introduce themselves, starting with the officers on my right.
Thank you. Nick Pettifer, Senior Planning Officer.
Matthew Porter, Senior Planning Officer.
Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, we do have some. We receive apologies from Councillor George Dennis, Councillor Nicholas Marks, Councillor Roger Noel, Josh Potts, everybody late, but he should be here later.
Okay, thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any comments, so I can take them as agreed? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Members are asked to note that section PCS/66 in the minutes appears twice in the minute documented published with the agenda pack. The duplicate section will be removed. Members are also asked to note that under application DC 23-0539, the recommendation should read DC 23-0539 should be approved in accordance with the officer's recommendation, subject to the completion of the legal agreement. I would propose that the minutes are amended to reflect these changes. Do I have a seconder, please? Okay, thank you. May I take a vote on the minutes, please, or are we all in agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Declaration of members' interest. Are there any changes to the declaration of interest? No? Okay, thank you. Announcements from the chair. I do have announcements to make this evening. Earlier this week, we heard the sad news about the passing of Councillor Liz Kitchen. She was highly respected, long-standing councillor, particularly for Horsham District Council. I didn't know her well, but I do recall when I first joined the council that she generously gave me her time, knowledge and support. Our thoughts are with her family and friends and her colleagues in the Conservative members here this evening. Thank you very much. Moving on to, excuse me, agenda item number 5 is the first item to consider. It's DC 23-2152, land north of High Bar Lane, Fakenham. Could I ask the officer to make their presentation, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members. Please note that since publication of the committee report, 2 further representations have been received from property addresses that have already submitted comment, and that raises no new matters not already addressed in the committee report. So this is a full planning application for 28 residential access and related works on the north side of High Bar Lane in Fakenham. As outlined in red on the slide, the site is adjacent to the north of the settlement, immediately abutting the built-up area boundary. As you can see on the slide also, future settlement expansion north and east is constrained by policy imposed by the Fakenham Parish Neighbourhood Plan. So Horsham District Councils endorsed this application site as an allocation for 40 new homes in the new local plan. And this supports the council's view that the site, as shown on the slide, is acceptable and sustainable, assessed as such against many other sites. But notwithstanding this, the proposal is a negotiated resubmission of a withdrawn scheme that firstly less dwellings, a reduction of 12. Secondly is at present a departure from an aged development plan. So the following slides show the site context. The built form of Fakenham Mushroom Factory is the north boundary experienced from within the site, as is the residential cul-de-sac of Maisie Close. That's photograph 2. Further north, which isn't shown, is Old House Farm, which is a non-designated heritage asset, but the setting of that is already compromised, including its impact on significance. So the slide now showing is showing the enclosed tree belt to the southeast boundary, and the slide in the bottom left corner is where the site borehole testing has taken place, and this is where the site borehole will be located. On this slide shown now, you can see that the site's bisected by public right-of-way footpath 2474, and that runs north-south parallel to the adjacent recreation ground. And there's also a permissive path linking into Storrington Road, and that's routed east-west across the site. And on this last slide of the site context, you can see that there's existing vegetation that provides screening to neighbours, and also recent clearance on the High Bar Lane site frontage, which has reduced its verdant qualities already. So on the slide at the moment is the proposed site plan, and you can see that the affordable home provision exceeds the current local plan requirements, and the open market and affordable homes are an appropriate range of sizes and tenures in your officer's view. As the site plan also shows, you can see the proposed layouts informed by retention of hedgerows and trees as far as practical, and this is a recognition by officers that there will be loss that's necessary in order to service an emerging housing allocation. It does need a vehicular access and does need adequate drainage. So, sorry, just returning to the negotiated layout, you can see that it provides a lower amount of housing than that's allocated, and that's a response to the character of the area, the back mitigation measures, and safeguarding of residential amenities, including noise, from both the playground and also the adjacent Fakenham factory. So one other key thing about the site layout, which we feel as officers has been well responded to, is the movements by foot and cycle to the benefit of all the community. That's the new bridle way, which will run through the site, 3 metres in width, and that will be west-east, and then also footpath 2474, which will be upgraded to a bridleway status, which is north-south route. In terms of the site access, there will be a new bellmouth junction on the north side of High Bar Lane, and then 2 metre wide footway on the east side of the bellmouth, which will extend to an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing to connect to the south side of High Bar Lane. The access works will require visibility to achieve the stage 1 road safety audit requirements and the swept path analysis. And all highway matters, which includes the cumulative impact on the local highway network to the satisfaction of the local highway authority. So just bringing together all the issues, including the demonstration of water neutrality through to the on-site borehole, we submit that there's mitigations to address material considerations when necessary, and that includes the amenities of neighbours and noise, and these limit and reduce harms to the scheme that it brings. And therefore, as submitted, it delivers sustainable development in accordance with national policy and is recommended for approval.
Thank you very, excuse me. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if the person's arrived yet. She has. Okay. First, public speaker. Caroline, please. And you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
I think, sorry. Good evening. I'm Caroline Instance, Chair of Chanctonbury Community Land Trust, which was created in response to the closure of a major employment site in Thacombe, the Mushroom Farm. We had valuable discussions with many Thacombe residents at our initial meeting. There was clear consensus. If there has to be development, it should be specialist housing for the elderly and affordable starter homes for young people. The high volume of new housing already in Thacombe doesn't meet local needs. We've seen the real consequence of this imbalance. Our preschool recently closed because it couldn't recruit qualified staff. Could that be because they can't afford the homes nearby? Our community depends on key workers, cleaners, carers, agricultural workers, and employees of our local businesses. A CLT is not anti-development, but we strive to ensure that the land is used for the community, whether for nature recovery, food production, employment, renewable energy, or genuinely affordable homes. The primary concern with this application, putting aside its lack of merits, which I'll let others cover, is timing. It was originally part of the Mushroom Farm. On the 25th of March, an inspector could overturn your decision not to let Bellway build 247 houses there. Any further housing on this site needs to be considered in relation to that number. And the site would be more safely reached via an access road through the Mushroom Farm rather than a narrow entrance on High Bar Lane by a children's park cutting down trees. Defer your decision until after the appeal. However, if you are minded to approve things today, please note the officer's report highlights key concerns. The housing mix is inadequate and no social housing provider has been identified. We are willing to work with Horsham's housing team and the developer to address these issues. Delay would allow that to happen. With our input, designs would be as carbon neutral as possible and offer genuinely affordable, energy efficient homes. Approval should be conditional on such agreement being reached. Please defer your decision until after the results of the Bellway appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Fiona, please.
Good evening. My name is Fiona McConaughey and I'm on Thacombe Parish Council. Welcome to Thacombe, possibly the largest dormitory village in Sussex. We're a smaller village with limited facilities and a disproportionate amount of housing. The government intended policy is to site development near transport hubs for sustainability. That's not us. The previous development along High Bar Lane is in ribbon form, whereas the proposed development juts out into the countryside. The proposal to fell and compromise mature oak trees, estimated to be 180 years old, is due to a poorly placed site entrance that could be moved to the southeast corner, removing the threat of flooding. Compensatory planning on the street scene cannot compensate for such mature oaks. Who will be responsible for the generous planting, care, maintenance throughout the site? Recent evidence nearby Abingdon site, much died. Water issues. In the planning officer's report, 3.4, the HDC landscape architect projection is noted, passed over. Namely, uncertainty around the borehole location and drainage strategy. Requested update drawings have not been submitted. This borehole system requires onerous ongoing maintenance, 0.36, with an increased likelihood of failure and potentially burdensome financial costs on future residents. The wider impact of water extraction from the aquifer should be balanced with the increase in runoff and surface water drainage from the built environment. Most water ends up in the sea, contributing to sewage spills, but lessening the recharging of the aquifer. The site is in a sensitive location, like past sustenance zone. All proposed ecological mitigations must be urgent and adhered to. Lighting and light spill must be restricted. Thacombe is a dark sky village. There is an appeal pending for 247 houses to be built to the northeast and uphill of this site. This 247 is larger than the acknowledged unsustainable development.
I ask that you bring your comments to conclusion, please.
That, together with the outstanding issues of this application, leads us to request deferral to this and other applications in the vicinity until after the appeal hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrew from the Thacombe Parish Council, please. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I just pressed the button. Okay. Members of the committee and officers, I thank you for giving Thacombe Parish Council an opportunity to speak on behalf of our residents. Thacombe Parish Council strongly objects to the proposal in front of you this evening. Time does not allow for a full list of reasons why we object to this application, and hopefully you've all had the chance to read them on the planning portal. I would say that we've monitored the various stages of the application from its inception 2 years ago and the very significant changes in the process when we have offered insight and reason via the consultation report submitted. However that may be, it has always been a strong objection that the parish has submitted, as the parish feels that the application is an overdevelopment of the site, which impacts the roads, especially High Bar Lane, and the green rural infrastructure and ecology that is being wedged into. The parish feels that such a large development is still not water neutral, and we still challenge the water proposals and the concerns around the quality and suitability of the water source. Drilling boreholes into a fragile and carefully balanced natural aquifer is risky, and what happens in future if it fails. Another factor is the volume of water passing down the edge of the site and the extra volume from the site if given the go-ahead. All of this will be added to the existing and future water flow downhill from the west from 75% of our village, which all has to exit under the High Bar Lane culvert and thus greatly increase the chances of flooding. Members will be familiar with the 209 homes on the development on the opposite side of the road, having all of their water flow down to the B2139 from the east, obviously centralising in the middle. The parish has concerns about the maintenance of the waterway and the culvert, given historic Section 106 clauses from previous applications that has still to be rectified, such as the road improvements at the Mushroom Farm entrance, a failure to complete the High Bar Lane bridle paths in a timely manner, along with fencing and drainage problems never resolved in the Massey Close development. Historically, when considering applications, quite rightly, members and officers look at the application in isolation as there's no further development approved. However, this is no longer the case with this current application. Members should be aware of the recent application for 25 dwellings on the Rushfield site, also located at High Bar Lane, which was approved by yourselves. Within the officer's report was concerns regarding traffic, and a recommendation was put forward to put in for a TRO due to these traffic effects. West Sussex County Council consultation report also highlighted surface water drainage mitigation, which was inadequate, and this has to be investigated further as it all comes downhill. Therefore, Thacombe Parish Council contend that given that both applications have not taken into account the cumulative effect that one another would have jointly on the existing community if they were both given the go-ahead, then Thacombe Parish Council requests that this application is objected to, or at least deferred until a comprehensive report can be undertaken into how to mitigate the cumulative effects of both sites on High Bar Lane and the surrounding community. We stress that this is not necessarily the fault of either applicant, but the timing of these applications. The current application we have before us probably did not have available time, as there have been no updates or amendments or officer notes added to the website since the Rushfields site was approved. No disrespect to the officer, but the report has one line saying that the Rushfield site was approved. However, this information is buried within the report. The only other reference made is about the amount of cars in response to trip data in and out of Thacombe. No mention is raised on how the road safety of the Rushfield site impacts on this site and how the proposed TRA may impact this site as well. Therefore, we suggest this development is no longer sustainable, it's no longer in isolation. Thacombe Parish Council does not agree with the change in the original application to remove a pump park in favour of a play along the way trail. The community were consulted on this feature as part of their neighbourhood planning. That is why it was considered in the first place. Thacombe Parish Council have not had any concerns raised to us in recent discussions regarding antisocial behaviour with the authority, as the parish is looking to put in their own provision for youth as part of the High Bar Lane Park refurbishment. If the committee were minded to approve this application, then as a condition, the parish requests that the land and the funds that would have supported the endeavour to be transferred to the parish to be put into use developing the trail in line with other PROW scheme improvements that we are currently undertaking with West Sussex County Council. This way, the parish would be assured that the scheme, and more importantly, the maintenance of the equipment, would be regularly undertaken to a high quality, unlike previous Section 106 conditions that have not been met or followed through by the applicant in the past in a timely manner. Once again, I would urge the committee to consider the sustainability and hope that they agree with our objection. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The Matt, please, who is the agent, I believe. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, members. My name is Matt Smith. I'm a fully chartered member of the RTPI and I'm the planning agent for the scheme. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank officers for their diligence in reaching the positive recommendation now before you, and I invite you to follow that recommendation. As you have heard, the application proposes 28 residential units with a policy-compliant mix of affordable housing. This is against the national objectives of significantly boosting the provision of housing and the current under-delivery of homes within the district. The committee report identifies clearly that the delivery of homes in the district is far below the minimum required 5-year requirement. As such, it necessitates engagement with paragraph 11D of the MPPF and the associated tilted balance. Additionally, we highlight that the site is a proposed allocation for 40 units within the emerging local plan. This provides clear evidence that the site is suitable for development and appropriate to the size of the area. To this extent, we highlight the location of the site within the settlement. There is residential development to the south and east, and the other emerging allocation at Rushford Nurseries was recently resolved to be granted permission to the west. To this extent, this proposal will comfortably assimilate within the village, making a positive contribution to the area. This is confirmed within the committee report. The proposed design and layout of the scheme has been worked through with your officers. The design responds positively to the unique circumstances of the site, including its layout, the bridleway access, the setting of the mushroom farm to the north, to name a few. The individual design of the units has sought to ensure that the dwellings assimilate well with the surrounding environment and include notable features seen elsewhere in the village. This includes making provision for a range of housing types, tenures, and forms. The result of such an approach will help the development to achieve sustainable development in line with the MPPF. Notwithstanding these benefits, the proposal will also help to provide significant other ones, such as ecological improvements, improvements to the safe function of the bridleway, enhanced connectivity, to name a few. We therefore respectfully ask that you follow the professional recommendation of your officers and resolve to grant planning permission for this comprehensive development. Evidently, the benefits of this scheme are not significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the limited harms as set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so just come back on some of those points by speakers. So in terms of relationship with the mushroom site, the understanding is that it was never part of the mushroom site, it's private ownership. So it's not part of that appeal. And never was associated historically with the mushroom site, it's a separate parcel. In terms of the runoff and the concerns about cumulative effect, the Rushfield scheme and this scheme are self-sufficient in terms of how they address surface water runoff. So both schemes successfully in their drainage infrastructure on the site ensure that the runoff is no greater than existing the greenfield rate. So you can see on the slide that they have two attenuation ponds within the development, and the reason they exist is for that purpose. It will discharge to the ordinary watercourse, but at a controlled rate, greater than greenfield. So in of itself, it won't exasperate any of those concerns raised by the speaker. And also Rushfield won't as well, because that is doing the same approach to surface water drainage. In terms of the traffic and the trip generation, so there is reference in the report that both Rushfields and this development have been looked at together cumulatively and found by the County Council Highway Authority not to be warranted in the fact that there wouldn't be a severe impact on highway network. And in terms of cumulative infrastructure impacts, both sites are local plan allocations. So as part of the evidence base, which underwrites the emerging local plan, there was consideration about infrastructure provision within the settlement of Faith. And both sites and the cumulative effects they have on social infrastructure was not found to be incorrect for these sites to be allocated for a greater quantum than actually proposed today in the application. In terms of the pump park, when the original application came in, a pump park was proposed, and then the understanding is that the position of the parish to their support for it changed in the time for the second application, and so the pump park was dropped. And that is part of the reason why it's no longer being provided, but also irrespective of the parish's views, the views of the parks team and also your officers is that this site doesn't very comfortably accommodate that. If we also need to accommodate all of the infrastructure necessary to serve the quantum of development, which is found to be acceptable in the emerging allocation, as you can see from the site plan, there is very little opportunity that for an appropriate siting of that type of equipment where it's going to be adequately looked over, supervised, and not going to cause an issue. And fundamentally, it's not in the local plan emerging allocation as a requirement to deliver on site. So in terms of the trees and the access, I can go in a bit more detail to that. So just firstly, obviously, separate to planning, there were tree works that have undertaken in autumn last year, and these were done at the request of West Sussex Highways because they identified deficient trees as a highway danger. So you can see that there has already been tree removal along High Bar Lake frontage. And then what you can see on this slide are the 4 trees that remain, and these form obviously a line of similar aged and sized trees, although tree 31 is the more substantial of the 4, and hence that was the direction to negotiations on where to put the Bellmouth Junction, because obviously 31 is the most tree of best quality, although they are category B, it is a standalone, the better of the trees. So that drove the direction to keep in intrusion into the root protection area to minimum. So on the slide, 31 and 27 are retained, 26 and 23 are to be removed. And where the access is shown on the down arrow. So another view, this is from inside the site looking out. And what you may question is, well, there's a nice big gap between 27 and 31. Why can't the bell mouth go there? Well, that's because of the root protection area of 31 is so substantial. And also on the other side, which I think the speaker raised, why isn't it in the gap between 23 and the neighbour? But the reason is various, that there's a slight drop in gradient to the ditch. The ditch is a constraint, and we need to keep that water course free, but also that's where the basin is going to go for the attenuation of the water, because it's the lowest part of the site. And also we need to make sure that the root protection areas of those trees which form important screening for the neighbour and are themselves of character are retained. So looking at the arrangement here, you can kind of understand where neighbours feel that, well, why are you removing 23 and 26 when you've got gaps either side? But that's the logic to this being the least worst option. And it's with regret that we do lose the trees, but it's an emerging allocation where the access can only be off High Bar Lane, and it needs to deliver the site. So that's just a drawing of basically what the photographs show. I think I've covered the main bits. Yeah, the main points.
Could I ask the officers for a point of clarification on the deferral point that was raised a couple of times?
So because the site's not associated with an Horsham site and it's a standalone scheme, it would not be correct to defer the application for the outcome of that appeal. One thing to be aware of is we do have mitigation for the impact of noise transfer if the vacant site was to stay in commercial factory use. But we've also looked at the site layout in relation to if the appeal was successful, and you can see by the housing arrangement that the distances and the interrelationship between the new properties on the appeal site and the current application are acceptable. So in both circumstances, the site can be delivered as it's shown.
Okay, I'll open the discussion and call on the local ward members. Councillor Circus.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I wanted to ask a question, which is this. We put a lot of, I don't know, it may not be possible to answer this, but I've still got to ask it, which is that we put a lot of stock dealing with what you might call the deficiencies of an application by means of condition. Well, we are fortunate in this authority. We have the excellent Madeline Hartley presiding over a very effective enforcement team. But of course, we know that there are local authorities that don't have an enforcement section. So my question that I'm considering is this. What happens in 2 or 3 years' time when we're no longer here and we have a unitary authority which could conceivably not have an enforcement section? If that is the case, can I ask the question, would it be potentially the case that what we put as conditions now by then could not be worth the paper they're written on.
Thank you, Councillor Circus. The test in terms, so that you'll be aware there are various tests that you have to go through in terms of whether you can impose a condition or not. And the test is whether it's enforceable, not whether you will enforce against it. It's whether it is enforceable. So in principle, if there was a breach of that condition, could you enforce against that? And if the answer is yes, then it meets the test and you can impose it. Whether the council then chooses to enforce it against, that's another matter, and ultimately that decision will have to be made at that point in time. But that's not the test before members today. The fact is, all the conditions recommended are enforceable, and therefore there's no reason to not impose them. Thank you.
Well, Chairman, what that tells me is that we may find in due course that there'll be a new authority without an enforcement section, and although they may be technically enforceable, they won't be enforced. And I think that's something we should bear in mind when we fall back on relying on conditions. What I want to do at this stage, Chairman, is propose formally that this matter be postponed until we know the outcome of the appeal. The appeal, as I understand it, we will know the outcome of the appeal in March. So we're not talking about a date a long time in the future. We're talking about the 25th of March. And whilst the officers are correct to say, obviously, these are self-contained applications, there is a relationship between the two. And Thacombe Parish Council feel very strongly, and I think the justification, that the way we approach this application in terms of access might well be influenced to a substantial extent to the outcome of the appeal that is currently being heard. It seems to me not much to ask to delay for a cycle or two the consideration of this application until we have the outcome of that appeal. And also it might actually give the applicant, you heard from the parish council that they felt very much that the housing mix was inadequate. Maybe it would give time for some reflection on the application itself. So I am moving, Chairman, that we adjourn consideration of this application until such time as we have the outcome of the appeal, which should be we'll either be able to reconsider in March or perhaps at the April committee meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just firstly, in terms of the comments on planning enforcement, I would suggest members that's purely speculative and is not material to the consideration of your application before you today. In terms of a deferral, it's not a reasonable reason to defer to await the outcome of the appeal. You've heard my colleague say, we've considered this application in terms of whether or not it remains as is or in a commercial use, or whether it comes forward as residential dwellings as per the appeal. There's no reasonable reason to await, and in fact an inspector would probably consider that unreasonable. Obviously we are duty bound to make timely decisions, and I see no reason why that would be accepted in my view. I don't know, my other colleague, if you had anything further about that. No, thank you.
Well, Chairman, I intend to move this. It seems perfectly proper that we should move this proposal. I don't think it's remotely likely that there's going to be an appeal in this relatively short period, and I think it is a justification for postponement. that the way we approach this application could, to a degree, be influenced by the outcome of that appeal. That seems to me to be perfect justification, Chairman, for postponing consideration.
Okay, before we move on that motion, I wondered if any other, Councillor, not moving on the motion just a moment. I was asking Councillor Manson if he had any comments to add as a local ward member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a number of comments to add. I first have a question, if I may. I'm reading through and I get to precondition number 25 on page 61. And I wonder if the officers could clarify this for me a little further. As I read it, it appears to be, as it says, no part of the development shall be occupied and until the necessary in-building physical infrastructure and external site-wide infrastructure to enable super-fast broadband speeds of a minimum of 30 megabytes. Is that all? I would have thought we should at least be talking gigabytes here. And I just wonder if the officers could explain to me quite what we mean here.
It's a minimum. So
I would say, anyways, yes, I would say it.
it's just,
Really?
yes, it's just a basic provision.
A basic snail.
Yeah, Amanda, I think you did raise that very question at a previous meeting.
I don't recall.
I do recall. This is from West Council in terms of conversations with them and what they recommended. I don't disagree with you. Perhaps that's something that needs to be looked at in the ground, but we wouldn't do that in isolation of a particular application. I think that would involve discussion with the county and the county-wide approach to any different figure. But as my colleague said, that is a minimum. Thank you.
On the deferral, I just wanted to make an observation that obviously the character as it stands now is a redundant factory unit. If we were to lose the appeal and have to contend with 240 dwellings, that will change the character and it will potentially mean that we would have to consider an application for 40 dwellings in a different character context. Whereas if we to determine today, we're looking at a scheme for 28, it will change the character and make us at a disadvantage if we were to resist a scheme which is a greater number but is still found acceptable in the local plan urgent application. And in terms of the housing, the greatest proportion across affordable and open market is 3-bed, and we will get 3-bed family homes affordable. So we may not be able to achieve that proportion of 3 beds if we have to accommodate or determine an application for 40 dwellings on the site, because you can see that on the site plan as presented today, there is very little extra space to allow for more family houses. The type of housing which will come forward, those extra 12 units, are likely to be mews or apartments and not 3-bed family homes with their own back garden.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. You asked me for if I've got any comments, and I started with a question.
Yes.
And the answer I've just heard there, to my mind, bears little relevance to the question that I asked. I don't know why we rambled off down that
Sorry,
road.
your initial question was about 30
was about 30 megabytes as opposed to gigabytes.
The advice that the council received is the minimum. It means that it could be a lot more than that, so it's minimum. Right. The officer was then, I think, some clarity. It's not quite, I understand it's not directly respond to your question, but it's directly response to the proposal, the motion that Councillor Serkis had mentioned. So, if you have any more questions,
I have some more questions and points, because we probably need to come back to the motion that has been proposed.
We will come. Sorry to interrupt you. We will come back to that shortly. I'm conscious that Councillor Bainham had your hand up.
I'm not.
So, no, you're not finished. I hadn't stopped him from speaking. I'm just saying that Councillor Bainham had his hand up and reassuring him that I would come back to him. But please carry on, Councillor Matt.
Right, I am concerned when I listen to the parish council and the strong objections that were made under 6.7 by in the neighbourhood plan by the parish council. I am concerned under 6.64 that this overdevelopment of this very smaller village, and it's regarded as a smaller village in 6.17, that harm that may be had to the Stonington air quality management area, and I don't think that enough consideration of the harm caused there has been done. I have looked into the infrastructure this afternoon. I looked up on public transport how I would this afternoon take a bus from Fakeham into Storrington and back for shopping. I would have to please inform this this committee here that when I asked the question this afternoon on Google, it said that at 1:27 p.m. this afternoon, I would have to walk 2.6 miles to the roundabout point in West Kilt, where I could then at 5:11 catch a bus into Storrington, do my shopping. My next available bus back to this area would be at 1:29 p.m. the following Thursday. Now, we come across this time and time again, and I will come back to the amount of development that this poor smaller village has taken in Abbeyworth Fields, and constantly over and over, and we never seem to get to the bottom of whether it is sustainable. I know West Sussex tick the box and say yes, it's sustainable, but really, you know, I know it's just an increment, but when you look at it overall in the past years, yeah, it is not sustainable to go and do your shopping in Storrington and come home again without taking a 3-day bloody journey over. Excuse my language. It's crazy. The impact on the infrastructure may not be severe in isolation, but cumulatively, it is excessive harm. And I'll leave it there so the officers could give me some update on those points.
Thank you. You could just switch your microphone. Thank you very much.
In terms of the air quality, obviously reliant upon the endorsed methodology of the Sussex Air strategy, and that provides a figure, and that is efficient mitigation. What it doesn't do at the moment is allocate that money by the strategy to a particular proposal. So as part of signing off through discharge of that air quality management plan, we can find suitable mitigation, if not in Fakeham, if in Storrington. In terms of the infrastructure issues and the cumulative transport effect, I mean, the answer is the evidence base that underwrites the emerging local plan looked at all these considerations and found that it was appropriate for the settlement to take these two allocations of an increased higher number than what's presented in the application.
Does any other member wish to comment on the proposal that Councillor Serkis has put forward? Councillor Knowles first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Fletcher.
Chair, I wanted to ask the officers, this was brought up in the presentation that we had from the state representatives about in terms of access to this site. That's
I'm not sure there is one. Because the Fakeham factory site is entirely separate, and the two are not dependent on each other in any sense. The only means of access is to High Park Lane vehicular. It's not possible width-wise to provide for vehicular access safely off Storrington Lane Road via the south of Maisie Close. The only option is High Bar Lane, and that's what the allocation is requiring.
It's not part of this proposal. It's in separate legal ownership. It's within our emerging policy. It's not something we can require. That you can require a development to access through another privately owned site. If there is a suitable access available, I think it could be something we can reasonably require. No.
Because you're effectively ransoming the site.
Yeah. Appropriate way of accessing a site which is going to work better for the community. It would be possible to try and negotiate that with the other site owner.
We have to consider the proposal before us. It's in separate land ownership. It would essentially be a separate planning application if you were creating an access through the land to the north. That's not what we have before us.
Sure.
In our view, it's not reasonable to require it. It's not within the emerging policy. And we've demonstrated, the officer's assessment, the county highway, the technical information submitted in support of the application has demonstrated that, this is a suitable access. But I do acknowledge the local concern.
Councillor Fletcher.
I was going to raise a point very similar to the one that's just been addressed by the officers, in that when considering the reasonableness of deferring, and that this is a separate site, separate ownership, that we don't have a power to compel, but also to say that in terms of the suggested timescales for deferral, with an appeal decision on the 25th of March, there is no way that an amended proposal will come to us for the March meeting of this committee. And realistically, even if all parties wanted to, there's no way it would happen in the April committee either. But as the officer said, we don't have any control over whether they were to. So I feel that it's not realistic to suggest that a deferral would be this issue could be sorted out by a deferral of a couple of months.
Thank you, Councillor Benham, and then I'm conscious of Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I think Matthew may have actually answered my question, but it was around the implications of the result of the appeal. And as I understand it, what you're saying is if the appeal falls, then there is no implication. If the appeal is upheld, and they win the appeal, then we would be faced with a new application with a denser layout of houses. If we pass this one today, then that would preclude that. Would that be right?
Well, not quite, Councillor. Just to be clear, I think what my colleague was saying, it is a risk. So we don't know what would happen, but I think we have to recognise there is a risk there. And ultimately, you know, if there was a delay in this, you know, that the applicant may appeal non-determination, there's always a risk at appeal that you lose some of the benefits that you negotiated as part of the scheme. So just to be clear, that's not necessarily a given, but I think it's a risk that members need to be mindful of.
Councillor Clark, and then I'll continue.
Quick question, Chairman. I mean, do you want questions to do with the application as it is, or do you want questions and clarifications simply on the proposal, pertaining to the proposal put forward by my colleague, Councillor Circus?
Sorry. Clarification on the motion raised by Councillor Circus. What I'm asking questions. If you have a question around the motions put forward by Councillor Circus, that's what I'm seeking.
Okay, no, my comments are about the application itself, so I will wait for later. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I have approached this application with an open mind and read the papers very carefully. There were a lot of things that concerned me. The police's concerns about safeguarding, the Thacon Parish Council's strong objection, the impact that it will have in Storrington, the lack of affordable 4-bed houses, and also I was very interested to hear the comments about the lack of older people and start-up housing here. Also, the really
to interrupt you.
Yeah, but it is related. I promise you. Just bear with me. One more sentence.
Okay.
Thank you. But also the need to cut down trees. So I have been listening to this and have been minded to consider a refusal, but I would much prefer to support a motion to support a delay, so that we really know what the full picture is, because we all know that they have suffered very, very severely from excessive housing. Thank you.
Any other points? Yeah, Councillor Croker, sorry, my voice is going.
Thank you, Chair. It's me that's supposed to croak. One thing I noticed about this application, the officer's report, is that there are 47 conditions, which I regard as somewhat extraordinary. And so I'm trying to support some sort of deferment for no other reason than allowing the applicant to perhaps answer some of the questions that are posed in those conditions. Thank you.
I do recognise your point, Councillor Croker, that if a matter can be dealt with by condition, and if it meets the 6 tests of condition, we can't require the applicant to submit the information. Obviously, if there are particular concerns that you think perhaps are not achievable, you know, then that's something that we can look at. But we simply can't ask for additional information just because we think there are lots of conditions. And again, if there are conditions you feel don't meet the 6 tests, or where you think, as I say, you think it's unachievable, then that's another matter. But simply because there are lots of conditions is not a reason to defer it. And if members are deferring it, there would have to be very clear reasons exactly what you would want addressed. So the applicant has some direction. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've been asked to comment on reasons for deferral, which really the nub of it. We need to have reasons that are that stack up. We can't defer because we want to explore something alternative to what is in the application. So the access point, I think, is a non-starter. It's not reasonable to do that. Similarly with conditions, if they meet the tests, it's 10 and 3 R's. So they've got to be proportionate, they've got to be related to the planning application, they've got to relate to planning itself, they've got to be enforceable, they've got to be proportionate, and so forth. You have to run through those in your mind. And if you've got specific problems about things which you can evidence, then fine, that might be reasonable. But I'm not hearing anything other than just sort of general, well, I'm not sort of sure about that. Well, you need to vocalise what it is that you have a specific concern with. Well, we need to know what specific aspect of the appeal would change your decision making. What is it about the appeal do you need to know, and how would that affect your decision in relation to this application?
Councillor Van der Hoek.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask. I mean, even if there are 240 homes approved, Mushroom Park, we still won't have grounds for review of this application. So, you know, it's all very well saying defer and let's see what happens, but we need to know a little bit more about what you expect the outcome of the appeal to do that will make us change our mind or put us in a position where we have a different decision to make.
Yes, I think that the motion to defer needs to be based on a reason. What is it that you are seeking from the appeal that would have a bearing on this particular application? Given that whatever happens in that appeal, it's not going to affect our position regarding the tilted balance and our woeful 5-year land supply. So once again, I'm afraid we find ourselves in a position that if it's just about impacts, well, that's not really going to fly.
Also, the appeal is a full application on a full application, so we're not dealing with an outline where we can, if that appeal's won, negotiate with that developer to provide access. Alternatively, the appeal will be based on the layout as it's been appealed, so there isn't an opportunity to provide that lead.
Councillor Circus, you've heard from the lawyer, so your motion needs to give a reason for deferral rather than just wait for the outcome of an appeal.
I think the reason I gave is perfectly reasonable. The appeal decision on the adjoining site is relevant to this current application in terms of the acceptability of the current application in its entirety. There may be aspects of the current application that we may have views on in the light of the outcome of the appeal decision. As far as I'm concerned, that's a valid reason for deferral. I'm moving it, and my colleague, Councillor Manton, is seconding it.
I want to clarify the if I may, please.
Would it be possible, Chair, to ask Councillor Circus why he thinks that this appeal decision would be relevant? What aspects of it would be? We need to be a little bit clearer about what this actually means.
I mean, are we really saying that this is truly a matter of law? As to, are you saying that as a matter of law, my motion to defer is an invalid one, or do you just feel that it would be desirable to elaborate?
I think it would be desirable that we act reasonably when making decisions, and planning guidance set out and delivered it in member training. We should know by now, as a collective, what it means to arrive at reasonable decisions.
So, in law, my moving this deferral is valid for the reason I've given. If it is, then I think we should just get towards a vote, please, Chairman.
I might add, my position here is wider than just law, that I do advise on the NPPF and planning practice guidance. It's not just a matter of what goes through the courts. I mean, eventually the courts will decide by reference to those documents.
Okay, sorry, can I just ask the development to come on this point? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. And before we go to the vote, and obviously there's been a motion and it's been seconded, so we go to the vote. I just want to make clear to members my professional opinion is this is not a reasonable reason to defer, but ultimately that motion's been put forward, it's seconded, and then we will go to the vote. Thank you. Oh, okay. In terms of, make sure I've got this right, Councillor Douglas. So your motion is to defer the application to await the outcome of the neighbouring appeal decision, which is relevant to the acceptability of this site in its entirety. Is that correct, Councillor Circus? Okay, thank you.
Seconder, I believe is Councillor. We'll go to the vote on this motion. All those in favour of the motion, please show.
That's 6-4.
All those against?
Against.
Sorry.
Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Therefore,
Yes, the motion. No, sorry.
so therefore the motion has failed. Thank you. Any further comments before we move to go? Yeah. Any comments on the? Sorry, Councillor Clark. Sorry, you had some comments. Apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I feel quite uneasy about this application for a number of reasons. We seriously looked at one time quite recently at this council to get somebody to speak on behalf of rivers and stuff. So just taking it one step further, could the officer put up the schematics on the entrance with the tree numbers, please? Yeah, that's the one. There was another one I think that you put up.
That was a photograph. Is that what you're after?
It's fine, yeah.
This one?
No, yeah, that one. Okay. So the proposal, so my first thing I have a problem with is our tree expert has basically said he's not happy with this. If you read paragraph on page 25, the comments are on the trees, about cutting down of the trees. If I move further along, if you look at paragraph 6.48, the impact on tree number 27, basically we're looking at down taking drive 26, 25, 23. The officer commented that you couldn't bring it in on the corner, but the reasons didn't convince me because there was a pretty big gap in the corner. Yeah, thank you. So I have a problem with the whole concept of the bell mouth because it skates over the fact that, in fact, if you read small print in the report, it actually says it could have a bad effect on 27 as well. If you're going to stop cutting down trees, you want to minimize it. So I'm not convinced that bringing in the slight entrance there will address minimizing the damage on the trees. It basically says that 27 would be a problem, and if you read paragraph 6.51, I have a problem with that. If I move on to my other concerns, water neutrality, my favourite subject. I would point out to officers that there seems to be a logical flaw in the fact that you state that this is water neutral. Because if I read paragraph 6.16, 1517, I would point out that it says, because treated sewage from the site is discharged back to the environment with approach, the abstraction of water is water neutral upstream of the Arun Valley sites, so there is no impact of this. I would point out to officers that if you look at your Southern Water bill, the pure water you take in to consume water, you're allowed to sewage and returning to the system essentially 92.5%. So you've got a 7.5% hole in your worker neutrality statement. So that's a question for officers to address. If I go forward and look at other paragraphs in terms of, if you look at paragraph 6.110, turbidity, you've got coliforms and turbidity iron and nickel, which basically, I don't have a problem with it, with reverse osmosis, because I'm very familiar with it, having come across it in industry. Basically, I understand the conditions that you put into this, to the application. I still wish to express concern looking at conditions 14 and 15. I just hope that these people know what they're doing. I'm not actually convinced that the system's going to work. And also, particularly, if you look at, where is it? Yes, 6114. In the event of an unseen emergency, there will be provision for alarm and immediate notification of management, blah, blah, blah. Backup generators and stored water would be in place for such occasions. We basically say that that's going to be dealt with by condition. If I look at the conditions 14 and 15, and officers assure me that it is meant that you've got pure water storage in there as well that will be contingent for an outage of some time, because you always hit problems, or you can hit problems with replacing these membranes, and you might run out of time and run out of water. So I just need a reassurance on that, because it doesn't state it specifically. And as the head of planning has said to me, if it ain't in the conditions, it don't exist. Or words to that effect. So those are my initial problems with the planning application, and I basically need some reassurance on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the trees, as the officer report does acknowledge, there is professional disagreement between our tree officer and the applicants, consultant arboriculturalist, about how the root protection area of tree 7 was calculated, methodology behind it. It is nevertheless to be retained. The issue is the extent of incursion within the root protection area and how that is in excess of the British standard. It doesn't mean simply because there is an excess that is in itself a refusal, because obviously we are looking at both scenarios where if tree 27 is lost, then we're still balancing out the harms and the benefits. And I think the officer report acknowledges that potentially in that scenario still, there would be enough benefits which outweigh the harm. In terms of moving the access further into that corner, the main constraint is the dry pond attenuation area. So the capacity of that, the design of that, is based on the calculations that have been submitted. So there's not much opportunity there to make a significant rerouting and shift the access over, because the dry pond area is required to collect the water. And also you start impacting within the root protection area of those trees on the tree belt. So on the face of it, when you look at this drawing, I can appreciate, and also from the site photographs, you can see, well, there is a big gap. But actually, when you see the root protection area consultants worked up plans for that tree belt, and also account for the dry pond area, there's very little opportunity to shift it. Obviously, as officers, we don't want to see category B trees lost, but in this case, it is very much the least worst situation. We've got 31 kept. That's a good tree, and that really has been the driver to where to position the bell mouth. 27 is shown. There is opportunity for replacement planting in that area around. We will endeavour to our best through the condition discharge, and I'm sure as the developer's agent is here today, he's hearing messaging about making sure that the works that are undertaken on the site are in the best practice possible to keep 27, but it is a recognition in decision making that there is an incursion and doesn't meet the British standard of 27, and you possibly have to look at the situation where 27 is lost. Is it still the same balance? As officers, we would say yes, the outcome is the same. Whether tree 27 is lost or not, the merits of the scheme outweigh it. In terms of the water neutrality, the foul water question, I think, is less to do with trying to, it's perhaps the terminology in the report because it's not really relevant to water neutrality. It's more to do with infrastructure pressure on how to address the environmental impact from the foul water on the River Chilt discharge scheme. It's not there to address the water neutrality aspect. We've obviously got 10 conditions spread across the decision notice, various trigger points being pre-commencement, the vast majority of that preoccupation, which have been applied on other developments involving on-site boreholes, involving reverse osmosis. They are considered to give enough safeguards in terms of ongoing practice through the appointed company who will operate the system. The other factor with this application, and possibly will be encountered ongoing forward and others, is that we are no longer just reliant on this scheme for it to demonstrate water neutrality, because we have accepted the Grampian condition. So although this scheme has presented a non-site borehole, the applicant can approach us on an alternative scheme, bespoke scheme, or choose to do the route of Grampian. So unlike previous applications where there was a reliance on this, in order for us to make a decision based on it being water neutral, that is no longer the case. There's no longer a sole reliance on the borehole as a solution.
If I may come back to him, please. Okay, fine. Based on the precautionary principle, I know it's a EU construct, I still feel that on precautionary principle, we shouldn't be damaging more trees than we need to. And I hear what you say. You also made a comment that there was a small dip there. All that says to me from your comments about the dry, basically the area to collect rain, surface water runoff, basically the dry pond. It's just a question of design. If the site was designed properly, we'll have a problem with you, but fine. Also, it's a design problem for surface water runoff. You mentioned the opportunity for a replacement tree to make good, taking out that tree if that's what we decide to do. It's not in the conditions. Or if it is, I haven't seen it. So if it's not in the conditions, then it should be, should it not, is a question. And finally, you mentioned Grampian conditions. Well, again, Grampian conditions aren't mentioned in this application. If it ain't in the application or in the conditions, unless I've missed it, which is quite possible, then it doesn't exist. Again, to quote our head of development, maybe she can correct me.
Thank you.
bear with us for a moment, please.
Chairman,
Oh, Councillor Canterbury, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think when you look at the site, it's a pretty scrubby piece of ground. And what is going to replace it in terms of vegetation, etc., is going to be much better than what's there at the moment. So whilst no one wants to see lovely old trees get cut down in 20 years' time, I'm sure that will pale into insignificance.
Thank you.
So it's condition 12, which is the Grampian condition for water neutrality. 12, small I. So the applicant's got both options. On the lands, so although the condition list doesn't explicitly reference a replacement tree for tree 27, because on the basis of the application it's to be retained, there are a host of landscaping conditions, and there's also an advanced planting condition. Condition 17, where we can hook that on. So in that eventuality that for whatever reason, unfortunate reason, outcome, the tree has to be taken out, or there's not good practice has been followed sufficiently, then there is opportunity to capture that replacement for those conditions. Also on the site plan, you can see that there's areas in front of the dry pond to the east side of the bell mouth, but also on slightly north of tree 27 and tree 31 for trees, new trees to go in there. So there's already a commitment shown within the site plan, which will be an approved drawing to show the developer's commitment to tree planting in those areas. So I think together there's enough confidence that we could go back and say, if the tree 27 does go, that you will be expecting good specimens of a good standard to go in there.
So is that something that we should write into the condition, or is that something that we can take as read on what you have said, but it's not written down? So
we could put an informative maybe to say that if you were to request it, to say that in the event that tree 27 is lost, then there will be a replacement expected under the landscaping to come forward with a landscaping scheme.
sorry, Chairman, could we do that, please?
Any final questions on? I'll come back to you in a moment, Councillor Surplus. Yes, Councillor Fisher.
I still have some concerns about the reverse osmosis and its impact. I'm not an engineer and I'm not an expert on this, but it does seem that they, as it says in, where is it? 6.110, it's detected, testing has detected levels of chloroform, turbidity, iron and nickel, as well as manganese sulfate and chloride, which are elevated. One of the products of reverse osmosis is the waste, and that can be five times more than what you actually get out of it. Where is that going to go, given that we are, as a council, dedicated, as is in the full council, to the recovery of rivers? Will this go into the Chilt? Where's it going to go? That's not mentioned. I read this carefully through and I can't see what happens to that wastewater, and I'm quite concerned. Also quite concerned about how much the figures of water that we're talking about are. So 10,300 litres a day coming out. Is that what the figure that's being used for the water supply to offset? Or is it going to be more like 5,000 or 1,000 litres once the waste has come off it? But I think that proposal there is seriously concerned.
So the way the system works is that as the water gets sieved through in terms of the treatment, there's like a sludge, which is basically what can't be consumed as water. So that's collected within the equipment and then emptied through the management company. It won't go back into the river system because the solid mass is sort of a sludgy consistency as opposed to wastewater. So it's almost a solid. So that's transported away. And the way the systems are operated is there's a management plan put in place where as those equipment components get worn down, because it takes up quite a lot of time and equipment running, when you have a lot of the sludge to remove, they will have backup components within the pump house. So they have a remote monitoring system. So when those tanks that take the sludge fill up and they have to be emptied, the remote system will alert the company to come out or to clear up. So I think maybe that's what you're trying to get at in terms of wastewater. It doesn't discharge back into the system. It becomes a sort of mass. In terms of the borehole calculation of water extraction, that's the entirety of the water demand from development, which would include the reverse process use in effect.
So can you just clarify what proportion of that would be usable water and what wouldn't? Of that 10,300 litres a day?
So it would all be usable because that's what is needed to what has been estimated with water usage from houses of that occupation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Circus.
First of all, on the question of informative, which Councillor Clark raised, I think he's right to raise the issue of the trees, which is a serious issue here. The last time I raised the proposal for an informative, the officers told me that an informative had very little value. So I'm not sure relying on an informative is really going to give, well, it certainly doesn't give me any, in view of the officer's comments previously, it doesn't give me much confidence, and I don't think it should give Councillor Clark any confidence. What seems to have happened in relation to this application is we're dismissing the Thacombe neighbourhood plan as having virtually no value, even though it's a valid plan. And of course, as we know, this development is not in conformity with the neighbourhood plan. And we seem to be giving a lot of weight to the so-called emerging local plan, the district plan, even though the inspector has said that the plan is unsound, legally invalid, and refused to consider the application any further. I know that that's the subject of ongoing discussion and challenge, but that's what the inspector, was the inspector's view of the plan. Because I noticed earlier on in the discussion, when the question of sustainability arose, which was I think very validly made by my colleague, Councillor Manton, who I think graphically showed how unsustainable this development was. the officers said we could rely on this as being sustainable because it is sustainable under the emerging plan. Well, the plan is yet to emerge, and as I've said, the inspector was far from impressed with that plan, and it basically threw it out when the hearings took place. So I think we should give more credit to the neighbourhood, to the local neighbourhood plan. And frankly, Chairman, if there's ever been a time in the life of this council when we need to give more thought to localism and the neighbourhoods and communities we represent, it's now. I think, therefore, we should give much more credence to the neighbourhood plan and the failure of this application to be in conformity with that plan. Thank you.
Yes, so on the informative, if members are concerned about the effectiveness of that as a method to alert to that issue, can put that you can ask or approach us about condition 22 and the hard and soft landscaping and see whether you wish to be consulted on that discharge. In terms of the overall planning balance and what weight we give components of development plan, obviously that's been detailed in the officer report. The Fakeham neighbourhood plan is out of date, and unfortunately the weighting of that is therefore much reduced.
We have a shortage of housing land supply, and whilst our local plan is currently paused, the evidence base is the most up-to-date evidence base we have for decision making. So it is relevant to our consideration. Thank you.
One final question for the ward members. Councillor Circus, they've just heard there that the office was proposing that condition 22 we would be consulted on. Would you prefer that than the informative? Sorry, apologies. Councillor Clark is the informative. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
so I should come back to you.
Yeah, if I can. I mean, what I was going to suggest is as a modification or additional sentence along the lines of something like, in the event of tree 27 failing or dying within 5 years of the work starting, it should be replaced by, you know, whatever. Specific. That would be acceptable to officers. I leave the precise wording to process, but that's the gist of what I suggest.
Just to say, Councillor Scott, that's fine. I think it could be a replacement tree to a standard to be agreed or something along those lines. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I am going to move to the. Oh, sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
Before we move to a vote, I really thought that it was probably, I'd like the opportunity to make a correction, because I think it's not correct to say that this has given a high weight to the emerging neighbourhood plan. It hasn't. It has given weight to the evidence base behind the neighbourhood plan, and that's quite distinctly different. And it is factually incorrect to say that the inspector has dismissed or thrown out our emerging local plan. The local plan is currently being paused by the inspector, the examination has been paused by the inspector, who has expressed his concerns about it, and the council is currently responding to his concerns. And I think it's really important that we are accurate about that, because it is strictly not true to say that the local plan has been rejected or found to be unsound, anything like that.
Councillor Manton, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me this. As you know, Asper, just a little confused. I heard Councillor Fletcher say there in the start of that statement, the emerging neighbourhood plan, and I'm a little confused.
Well, in that case, if I said that, I misspoke.
Okay, just want to be clear that the neighbourhood
Sorry, I do apologise if I said that. I didn't catch myself. My mistake.
So the neighbourhood plan is a made plan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I am going to move now to vote on the substantive recommendation with a change to addition to condition 22, which will state that should the tree 27 be lost or die within 5 years, a replacement will be planted. Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Clark? Thank you. So therefore, the recommendation is to approve full planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and completion of the Section 106 agreement within 4 months of the decision of this committee, or such longer periods as agreed by the Director of Place, acting reasonably and properly. Those favour, those supporting the recommendation? I'm confused. Okay, sorry, I've confused you. Those for the application with those amendments made.
For.
Those against?
And 5 against.
Any abstentions? No. Okay, therefore the application has been approved. We'll take a 5-minute break, if we may, please.
We can reconvene, please.
You've got to be out of here by 8 o'clock. Okay. Thank you. I trust you're all suitably refreshed. Moving on to DC 24-1452, Unit 18, Billingshurst Trade Park, Staines Street, Billingshurst. Please could the officer make their presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to make members aware, there's been one additional letter that's been received in support for the application, citing increased houses, needing increased infrastructure and consumer choice, which has been received following the report having been prepared. The application site comprises Unit 18 within the wider Billingshurst Trade Park, located at the very northern edge of Billingshurst. Since the adoption of Billingshurst Neighbour Plan in 2021, the site now lies within the expanded built-up area boundary. To the north of the site is New Road, to the west is Staines Street and the new roundabout access into the trade park. To the east is a public right-of-way, and to the south, a new access has been created for pedestrians and cyclists to access phase 1 of the site. The site is considered in policy terms to be an existing employment site. This is an aerial view of the site. Phase 1, which is within the green dotted box, was permitted in full to deliver up to 5,000 square metres of employment floor space in the short term. Most of phase 1 has been built out, with the exception of some units in the northern area, just where phase 1 is written. And all but one of the built out units are currently occupied. Phase 2 within the orange area was permitted in outline only, with a view of delivering the larger employment warehouse style units to follow on from phase 1. Phase 2 has been consented to deliver up to 14,075 square metres of employment floor space. For clarification, employment floor space comprises the B uses, so B1, B2 and BC. In the application site, it's specified as B1C. So it's also to be noted that this B1C use has now moved into the E class. So it's EG3 or 3I3. So for ease, I'll continue to reference them as E classes. As you can see from the aerial view, the larger part of phase 2 remains undeveloped at the current time. The application site lies within this undeveloped part of the site. The vision for phase 2 was to utilise a cut and fill approach to the sloping site, which creates plateaus for larger units to sit on and reduce the heights and visual impacts in relation to the wider countryside to the north and the east, to be reinforced by landscaping corridors within the site. This is the site, the orange box, in relation to the adjacent Lidl store and the petrol filling station. As you can see, the ground level step up towards the east and the estate road currently terminates at this point. The Lidl store was a separate drop-in application at a time when phase 1 was still at an early stage, and it was demonstrated that the outstanding employment floor space could still be delivered across the site. The Lidl store represents some 1,900 square metres of retail floor space within the convenience goods category. The current application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a single unit on plot 18, with a floor area of 3,119 square metres. It has a fenced garden centre yard to the eastern side, along with delivery space, vehicular access of the internal estate road, parking along the northern side of the unit. The landscape proposal set out a perimeter strip around the car park and to the rear of the unit and includes a number of trees. The application seeks retail use for the proposed unit, as well as retaining the option of the B-class employment uses that were consented under the original trade park permission. The submitted documents identify the range as an end occupier for the site, and the application has been submitted on the basis that the identified retail occupier would bring about investment into the site to enable the build-out of the remainder of the site. The external elevations follow the wider design aesthetic adopted early on in phase 1, using silver cladding panels, timber corner details, and grey standing seam roofs. As mentioned previously, the trade park was permitted in mid-2019 with a view of being able to deliver an overall quantum of up to 19,075 square metres of modern, fit-for-purpose employment floor space across the 2 phases, thereby addressing the quantitatively assessed shortfall of employment floor space in the district at the time. As part of the original submission, the applicants identified a cumulative interest of some 12,500 square metres derived from local employers looking to relocate and expand and acquire sites on the trade park. Although the site was then outside of the built-up area boundary and not allocated for development, it was in conflict with the planning policies, but the contribution to much-needed employment floor space in the district weighed in favour of development. Following on from the original consented development, we now have approved the reserve matters applications and discharged pre-commencement conditions for the remaining units in phase 2. For the application site in Unit 18, there are 2 approvals which enable a degree of flexibility in delivering either a single large unit that can be split into 2 or 2 separate buildings, which achieve employment floor spaces of just over 3,500 square metres or just over 3,800 square metres. Landscape details show perimeter planting and a number of trees. As approved, the employment density on Unit 18 would be between 29 and 102 staff, depending on the consented use, which is based on the Employment Density Guide 2015. For comparison, the proposed development and the consented approvals for Unit 18 are broadly similar in terms of appearance, bulk, and massing. There are 2 main points of consideration for this proposed one. One being the loss of employment floor space, with consent relevant to 18 set to deliver between 3,500 and 3,800 square metres of employment floor space, but noting employment generating of around 3,100 square metres, and the impact arising from the proposed retail development on the viability and vitality of the existing retail centres, namely Horsham Town Centre and Billingshurst. Turning to the first consideration, Horsham's economic strategy notes that Horsham has a highly skilled workforce and some of the highest educational attainments in the country, and that we have a high rate of business startups. However, it also identifies the need to deal with various economic challenges to attract inward investment and provide new commercial floor space in order to support the growth of existing businesses. The report identifies that Horsham has a limited supply of office space and industrial warehouse floor space, with increased demand and loss of existing stock, as well as old and dated buildings. A series of priorities are set out, focusing on the ability to secure economic growth and inward investment by ensuring that a range of quality commercial floor space is available to meet growth and business needs within the district, which will in turn enable the district to offer high-paid and skilled employment opportunities in order to provide residents with employment within the district, rather than having to commute beyond and into other areas to find those opportunities. Under the current local plan policies, there is a presumption in favour of retaining and protecting existing employment sites, such as the trade park, and to safeguard their function, enabling appropriate expansion and being able to support small startups and move on businesses. loss of employment sites and floor space must be able to demonstrate that the site or premises is no longer needed and or viable for employment use. Under these policies, employment refers specifically to the B class uses, which is used to inform the local planning policies on the strategic need for employment land allocations within the current and emerging plan periods. Other employment generating uses such as retail, tourism and hospitality are not considered under these specific employment policies. To provide a snapshot of the economic employment land requirement assessed as part of the emerging local plan, it is clear that there remains an outstanding need to provide new local employment land in the district. This is a quantitatively assessed current need across the district, which has been taken forward into the emerging draft employment policies, and which notes that Billingshurst Trade Park, as an existing commitment, is capable of delivering some 19,000 square metres across both phases, and which continues to safeguard existing employment sites so that they can continue to meet the needs of the district. If Unit 18 is taken out of the calculations for resulting employment floor space, this site has permission in place to deliver, then the overall achievable figure sits somewhere between 10,000 and 13,000 square metres. The site, the trade park, would include then some 5,000 square metres of retail-based floor space, including the application site and the adjacent supermarket. Although officers acknowledge that the proposal would deliver employment-generating opportunities in retail of a comparable number to the range that could be achieved by way of the consented B-class uses, there would be a significant loss in the ability of being able to deliver the much-needed quantum of employment floor space falling within the B-class uses. A second consideration relates to the retail impact of the proposed development. Paragraph 91 of the MPPF sets out clearly that main town centre uses should be located first within town centres, then edge of centre locations, and only if suitable sites are not available or expected to become available within a reasonable period should an out of centre site be considered. Paragraph 92 goes on to state that edge of centre and out of centre proposals should be well connected to the town centre. For reference, the proposed retail use is considered a main town centre use, and the site is not an edge of centre location. As you can see, it's separated from the defined village edge, and the distance is some 735 metres. The local plan looks to place Horsham at the top of the retail hierarchy within the district, and we have policies that recognise Broadbridge Quadrant as providing a successful redevelopment area specifically for out-of-town retail, which supports Horsham as a primary shopping retail focus for the district. The applicants have submitted a retail sequential test which identifies specific requirements for the proposed occupier in terms of unit size, delivery access, customer parking and a garden centre, finding that there are no other suitable sites within the search area available. The submitted retail impact assessment considers that the proposal would provide complementary additional facilities for users of the site, as well as the residents of the expanded village and the wider catchment area, which amounts to 130,000 residents. It acknowledges policy objectives to promote and protect the vitality and viability of Horsham Town, as well as its primary focus and position. Local and neighbourhood plan policies are referenced, noting the loss of shops and banks along the Billingshurst High Street being highlighted as an issue in the neighbourhood plan, as well as the wider need to improve the visual quality and retail experience of the main shopping area of Billingshurst. Reference is made to the Billingshurst Village Centre SPD and the Billingshurst Retail Study, which seek to focus on meeting local needs and provide a strong and diverse retail offer. The emerging Reg 19 policies continue to identify Horsham as a primary centre and Billingshurst as a secondary centre in terms of the retail hierarchy, and to retain the position of Broadbridge Heath Quadrant as an out-of-centre retail destination. A submitted retail impact assessment acknowledges an existing outflow of shoppers using Broadbridge Heath and considers that the range could improve on this, and that furthermore, Billingshurst performs as a local top-up convenience shopping role, with the localised needs of surrounding residential areas not being met sufficiently by available retail in Billingshurst. which is submitted as being addressed by this application. The submitted predicted trade draw arising from the all-encompassing product range and the unique one-stop shop nature of the proposed occupier is considered within the retail impact assessment as being more likely to compete with garden centres, home base and Mole Valley country stores, as well as to draw a small amount of trade away from Crawley, Chichester and Worthing, all of which are noted to already have branches of the range. The retail impact assessment considers a very limited trade draw from Billingshurst, reflecting limited comparison goods available in the village high street and considering that Austin's caters for a different market with a more limited offer. In terms of Horsham, the proposal is considered in the retail impact assessment to lead to a very modest trade draw of around 0.2% or £0.6 million, which is referred to as a small reduction in growth rather than an absolute decline. However, in assessing the proposal, officers are concerned that at just over 3,000 square metres of retail floor area, the proposal would represent some 60% of the overall retail floor space available within the village centre, which is considered to lead to a very real prospect of a diverting footfall away from the existing retail offer in the village, along with impacting on the ability of attracting future retail business into vacant units and on the ability to secure staff within the village businesses. Therefore, upon careful consideration of all matters, the proposal is recommended for refusal.
Thank you very much. I'm the first public speaker, which is David, please. Mr. Chair. I represent the Coneyhurst community east of Billingshurst along the 872, so it's not that close to the site, it's slightly on the other side. The original 2019 consent for a small trade park that serves local community and the village centre needs to be really thought about here today. This was a deal that was made by Dunmore, the developer, with the council, against losing the green fields, obviously, that were there before and that obviously the local quite attached to. So this application is clearly something quite different to what we had originally agreed altogether, parish and yourselves, obviously the Horsham Council. So it proposes a large suburban city scale retail capacity. So it's clearly contrary to again, what was originally proposed, agreed on this site a few years ago. The proposed loss of agreed employment is also contrary to the developer's original offer. Of course, they might be saying today that this is not as profitable enough anymore, but profit making is not what we are here to discuss today. It's just about planning. To us, see, it's not a free. There's no free ride where anything can get built as long as it offers a commercial semblance of job creation. Importing cheap, low quality Chinese or Indian made products as mass retail is not going to require local skilled labour or attract some businesses to the village. Billingshurst Parish Council in the neighbourhood plan has identified a need for small businesses, startup spaces, offices and workshops. Generally, this is what we would consider as an attractive offer in terms of employment. It would help the existing businesses to expand, which is quite an important thing that could happen here, others to be created, and to retain the ones that are already there. The existing high street is in decline, like many villages and small towns around. Small businesses are already finding it quite difficult to survive the mass global unfair competition. The increased traffic outside of the village will certainly not help. Excuse me, sorry, can I ask you to bring your comments to a conclusion, please?
Sure. I'm really finished. Since we all know that no customers going to the range or to the trade park would walk back to the village for further purchases. If we want to keep youngsters creating sustainable and skilled jobs in the area, we have to offer them a credible future anchored into the community needs. A range in Horsham, another one in Billingshurst, is actually another nail in the coffin of Billingshurst activity and community life.
Thank you. Deepak, please. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
So first, I'd like to say the committee report was very well considered. So thank you for that. I'm here to request 2 additional reasons. One on the incorrect traffic assessment, and 2 on lower employment numbers. Let me pick the first one up. 400. 400 is the daily vehicle trips at peak times that Horsham District Council and Highways have calculated when the park is fully built out. If you look at 6.79, you'll see those figures. But the park is only a third built out, and the number of trips at peak times daily is 1,200. How do we know that? Because a manual count was conducted last year on the roundabout and the park. So if you play that out, for a third of the park, we have 3 times the amount of traffic that was planned for the full park. You can assume that when the full park is built out, we'd have around 3,600 versus 400 that the traffic assessment has calculated. Now you may ask yourself, how is that happening? Why do we have such a massive disparity? The applicants behind us consistently present low trip count. Highways don't challenge the trip count, and HTC accept Highways recommendation. Let me give you another data point. Nicola talked about Lidl. The applicant presented low trip counts that enable them to say that the car park at Lidl would only be a third full at peak times. If you go to that car park, that's not the case. Multiple times during the day, and definitely at peak times, that the 120 parking spaces are used up. Actually, people from Costa park their cars and walk over to the Lidl because they can't park in the Lidl. Now let's make a range, which is what you can do right now. Nicola mentioned 131,000 people is a catchment area that the applicant is stating for the range. Yet, the applicant is stating only 20 additional trips will be generated. 20 additional trips at peak times for a population of 131,000. So what I ask you to do is what you did on Hillen House. Councillor Fletcher talked about 2 Land Rover Discoveries passing each other, and Highways were keen to reduce the size of the road. You went against Highways' recommendation, and you basically voted against them and said that's not a viable option. I'll say do the same here. My second reason, and this will take 10 seconds, in the applicant's water and charity statement, they state that there will be a reduction of jobs from 81 for current use to 33. So they will present how many jobs they will be creating at the end of the 80s, 90s. They stated in their own water and charity statement, 81 will be reduced to 33. So I'd ask you to equally reject this application with additional piece of reason around employment numbers. Thank you.
Councillor Sam Bateman, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
I have a confession. I love shopping, I enjoy home improvements, and on wet, miserable days, I'm drawn to out-of-town retail outlets. If I were naive and unquestioning, I'd support this application. But I'm not naive or unquestioning. I know it's important to study small print and listen to trusted, qualified experts. And from that, I can see that Dunmore is not offering a golden ticket. They're delivering a Trojan horse. I call it a Trojan horse because it will have unintended consequences. It will have the effect of destroying a local high street. Billingshurst is now a very small town. Its high street is not strong enough to weather the storm of a whopping great retail outlet. And Dunmore wants to drop a 60% increase in retail within spitting distance. It'd be naive to believe that high street vitality will not be adversely affected. Footfall will be drawn away. Community cohesion, which relies on those public interactions and engagements in the streets, will suffer. I had a letter from the head of operations for Parkway. They are the owners and runners of Austin's. Austin's has been on Billingshurst High Street for 40 years. And we've had a hardware store on that site for over 100. They told me in their letter today that it would seriously and desperately destroy their operation. They also believe it will affect all the other operations in Billingshurst as well. I think, therefore, you've got to remember that what Dunmore are offering in terms of jobs, you have to discount from that figure the current and future jobs that will be lost from Billingshurst High Street. Moving from there, Dunmore are arguing that their ambition to deliver the higher quality engineering jobs is now unachievable, that their own projections, are wrong. They claim there's now no demand for light engineering and trade. I'm highly sceptical. First, Dunmore approached me last month to discuss expanding the business park outside the field and the limits that are currently set there. That new site they want to use for trade. That's the category of usage they're arguing is not in demand. Second, I spoke to Dunmore's marketing team on Monday, and then with marketing teams for local business parks close by. Dunmore are pitching their trade units at £16 per square metre, 15 is our plan. Whilst 1 mile down the road, competitors are successfully achieving lets on trade units. Only the competitors are marketing theirs at £9 to £12 per square metre. Perhaps Dunmore's issue is their pricing point. Add employment opportunities. Those created from retail are not comparable with those lost to trade and light industrial. One is more skilled, more economically valuable. Remember, if tonight you undermine Horsham's capacity to deliver that light industrial trade use, the district's going to have to make up for that loss by building elsewhere. Where do you want the district to turn to make up that shortfall? Is your ward willing and able to step up and deliver the land suited to trade counters and light industrial use? If your ward is not disposed to address the shortage, please don't add to the difficulty creating it. I've also studied the history of this development to understand how well Dunmore perform when it's delivering to its own planning obligations. My research showed me that Dunmore are keeping Horsham's compliance team very busy. They continually breach their lighting standards. Those agreements are designed to protect the rare bat species in the area. And they've been so stingy with the planting that 5 years on, the landscaping in situ bears zero resemblance to the originally filed plans. Finally, I want to put your consciences at ease about losing potential jobs and assure you that shopping opportunities will be in abundance. Feel free refusing tonight. We have an out-of-town retail park at Broadbridge Heath, less than 3 miles from that site. It features a soon-to-be vacant unit, the old home base site, which is roughly the same scale as the site under discussion here. It also has the infrastructure and capacity to sustain the level of traffic that retail will attract. So no need to pave over acres of countryside for 140 additional parking spots. The range can occupy the vacant site at Broadbridge Heath. It's the fallback option anyway. So Horsham and the range can still prosper. Their only loss is having to locate a brownfield site rather than a greenfield site. Refusing this application, it's a win for retail, it's a win for quality jobs, for the environment, and for the ongoing vitality of the local high street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex Marshall. Alex, please. Sorry, some confusion about who you are. I believe you're Alex Marshall, is that correct? Thank you.
We're on.
Yeah, sorry.
Evening, councillors. I'm Alex Marshall from Dunmore Group. We are the applicant and the owners of Billingshurst Business Park. We have submitted this application on behalf of the range, who are committed to the site and want to deliver this much-needed local community, generating economic growth and 80 guaranteed jobs, including 60 managerial and skilled jobs. Billingshurst Parish Council and the local community recognise these benefits and have both supported the scheme. We are simply seeking to confirm an additional flexible use for the range within E-Class for this already consented building. Hopefully you've had the time to review some of our correspondence over the past week, explaining there are a number of errors in the case officer's report which could have been corrected if they had engaged with us as they ought to. In light of this, Horsham's Director of Police, after reviewing our recent correspondence, has decided to file an official complaint. In my email sent on Friday, the 7th of February, the correct information confirmed no overall loss of employment space. The table shown earlier by the case officer doesn't include phase 1 numbers. No sequentially preferable sites available. Retail impact study confirming no significant impact on Billingshurst or Horsham. Clearly, the range is not a high street use. And a biodiversity net gain solution that's already been agreed with the ecology officer. I now urge the committee, in light of this corrected information, to make the right decision on the planning merits and for the community and to consent this application. With a positive outcome, this consent will provide the required financial investment to deliver the infrastructure for the remainder of Billingshurst Business Park, continuing its success story of being the only local site to deliver any new employment space, bringing new jobs in Billingshurst in the last decade. We hope the councillors will see this huge benefits this consent will bring and support the scheme along with the parish.
Thank you very much.
So just to briefly pick up a couple of points on the highways matters, the highways officer has been asked to look at the additional information, and they are confident that the junction is working well within capacity and would even work within that capacity within a 2040 scenario of growth consented by way of developments in Billingshurst and the temporary growth figures, as well as the Hilland House scheme. So they are satisfied that the proposed development would not lead to the significant adverse impact on the highway network. They do note that there's slightly more trade counters on the site than they originally envisaged, but this is within the consented B class permitted development. So trade counters fall within the 8 use class. They acknowledge that Little didn't form part of the original application, but they consider that there would be linked strips and bypass strips, so it's all within the capacity of the highway. So they've reinforced their position that the proposal wouldn't lead to a significant increase on that traffic impacts.
Okay. Councillor Fletcher, sorry.
Could I just ask the officer to clarify whether in those conversations with West Sussex Highways, whether they actually accepted that there was a discrepancy in the figures, or whether they simply said that what figures were in fact not relevant because the junction was working in capacity and would continue to.
It's not really a discrepancy so much as there's a range of potential highways figures depending on the end user across the site. So they've taken an average rather than a sort of a maximum or a lower end. So it's within the anticipated range, and yeah. So the roundabout still continues to function within that robust end scenario.
It wasn't the calculated range I was talking about, it was the difference between the 400 odd and the 1200 odd on the manual traffic.
I think they accept that there's some variation within the TRICS data set. So it's not a finite science, it's a range of calculations that they have to work towards.
Thank you very much. Open the debate with Councillor Baynham, local board member. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, so I just have one question before I make some comments. I think, Mr. Marshall, in your comments, you said that this proposal was supported by Billingshurst Parish Council, yet the papers stay neutral. Can I have clarification on that?
Yes, they neither supported nor objected to it, so it was a neutral representation.
Right. So the heart of any village is its high street. I've been a resident of Billingshurst for 30 years, and although we still have a reasonably vibrant high street, it has struggled. I note that the report says that what is likely to be sold in the range will not be adverse to to the current retail offering in Billingshurst, but I somewhat doubt that because, I mean, looking at the list of products, it's on page 90. Some of them say, so we have their pet products at the top. We have a pet product store on the high street. It talks about stationery. There are several stores in Billingshurst that sell stationery. It talks about hardware and garden goods. We have a hardware and garden goods store and DIY goods. Okay, much smaller scale than you would find at the range, but it's there, and that's the one that's been referred to by Councillor Bateman earlier on. Small electrical goods. Well, we did have one of those, but that is closed now. And we have stuff with lots of other commerce there. So for example, three national banks used to be on the high street, and they're not there anymore. One is still boarded up. One is, I think, it's a sort of fitness path of some kind, and the other one is a charity shop. So it's facing difficulties, and I think the addition of a edge of town, edge of village, all in one superstore, if you like, would undoubtedly exacerbate that issue. And there's also the other, it would be direct competition in many ways to the mole store, which is there as well. So there is a problem. Now, Mr. Marshall references the employment opportunities, and we have to take that into account because we need employment jobs. But are these the right sort of jobs? We're talking mainly retail. Are they the ones that we're looking to attract in? But I mean, we've heard about the references to the high level of achievement of the local population in terms of national averages. And we need to sort of keep that here rather than those people moving off to Crawley, London, Brighton, wherever else. And so I see this as a very difficult choice to make from that point of view because those jobs don't exist at the moment. So we're looking at things that may not happen in the future, but we've got to give it the opportunity to grow. And what this does is it provides the impetus for further decline, which we've seen. I mean, decline is a different word, but we've seen it in many towns and smaller towns across the country where high streets have died, and then the soul of the village dies with it. And those are my thoughts as not only as a councillor for Billingshurst, but as a resident of Billingshurst. So I would find it very difficult to support this step.
Councillor Trollope.
Thank you. I think it's one of these rare occasions where my experience of having grown up in America is actually useful to the discussion. Never thought it would happen, but it has today. The way I see it is, and I know I'm being very crude in this analogy, but what I kind of see this is the American model. The American model for a small town. All of the trades sort of on the outskirts all come together with big parking lots, and you drive to it, and you certainly wouldn't see anybody cycle or walk there. Just in America, they look at you as if you're crazy if you walk. They really do. And that's kind of what I see. And if you go into an American trade park in anywhere in the US, just about the least where I've been, you put yourself in amongst a group of shops, and I swear to God, you don't know where you are. You could be in Hawaii or Alaska or California, and you wouldn't notice the difference. The charm, the lack of charm is just overwhelming. That's one of the reasons why I don't like living in America. And I just see all the towns looking the same, with the same fast food chains and the same retail outlets and the same sort of shops with no disrespect, but the range. You have it in America kind of similar. You have ish, sort of similar. You know, that this ugly in there, and I can't help but think and agree. I have the letter again from Austin's in front of me that you know they feel, and I agree with them, that it would decimate their trade. And I see Austin's, which is a lovely shop, by the way, not the reason to put against the range, but it's at the center of Billingshurst. I mean, most people go to Austin's and then go look at other things in Billingshurst. It's, you know, it's been there forever. Well, for 40 years plus some time as another unit. And I see it going would take down a lot of other shops in the center, and at best, the center would be a few pubs and lots of charity shops. And I don't know. I also think, hey, they're probably, if not already, going to take over the site in Broadbeach Heath. It's 3 miles away. As Councillor Bateman has said, people can drive there easily. Hence, like as well, I do. Yeah, but it's not like the range can't exist in the local community. So unless I hear something massively to persuade me otherwise, between now and the vote, I'm not able to support it. Thank you.
I just want to clarify for members. I think we recognise Broadbeach Heath has got the out of town centre there, but obviously this isn't about a preference. So we do just, you know, for the order of fairness, we obviously need to consider the proposal for us. It's not about we would prefer it to go here. Is it acceptable at this site? Thank you.
Just for clarification, it doesn't change how I think.
Councillor Van der Burg.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little. If you have a range 3 miles down the road, you're going to go there, and you're going to go, and there'll be other shops there that you're going to go to. And I'm actually not convinced that having no range in Billingshurst and a range 3 miles down the road is going to do more harm than good to Billingshurst. You know, if you can provide as much as you can possibly provide to the village, people are going to stick around the village to do their shopping. And I question the logic of saying, if we don't have a range here, but we have one over there, we're going to keep people buying from Billingshurst. I suspect it might be more harmful than otherwise.
Councillor Fisher.
I just wanted to share that I was in retail for 30 years, had 6 shops, 3 in London, 3 in Brighton. The final death knell for me was a Tiger opening 3 doors down, where I couldn't buy wholesale what they were selling for a third of the price. So the internet's also really impacted independent retailers. That was around about the same time. It's really tough being an independent retailer, and I think it's really important that we think about the well-being and the diversity and the uniqueness of Billingshurst and its high street for its residents and for the future and for its economic development. Just endless retail parks is not what we want for our future and our district. And there are places where else we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manton, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is more just a sort of statement from me. I sat here and listened to Councillor Bateman with great interest, and we've had a conversation. Naive and unquestioning. Okay, you can criticise me with that. It's fine. Am I naive and unquestioning?
Sorry, Councillor, please not engage with the members of the public.
Sorry, I took her as a member of the council, not the public. My apologies. It was asked whether there was a ward that would step up and provide trade employment opportunities. And I feel it's actually a real shame that the Thacon PC team, who were here earlier, are no longer here. Because I can say that, yes, Thacum would love to host trade employment at the Monaghan's mushroom farm site in Thacum, rather than yet more housing. I'm sure that the Cabinet Member for Planning will agree with me that residents in the rural south of the district would have the option to reduce the number of unsustainable journeys to and from Horsham and Broadbridge Heath if some retail outlets were devolved to the parish level. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Knoll. Oh, I'll come to you in a moment. I wasn't sure whether you were.
Thank you very much. In 2019, when permission was granted for the trade park for employment, the applicants did a wonderful piece of research. They employed a company called Proponomics, which is a brilliant name for a company that looks at property and economics. They came up with a lot of points, but there was a table with 12 points as to why this site fitted into the economic issues identified in the Horsham District policy framework. I won't read them all out because we know a lot of them, but they said that this proposed development will help to correct the deficiency of the lack of employment land in the district, and that whilst much of the business stock does not meet the requirements of existing businesses or attract new businesses, this development would do that. They also said that the framework says that there needs to be opportunities for existing businesses to grow and expand and change to meet modern business demands. This is a key benefit of the proposed development, responding to the needs of Billingshurst businesses and supporting the local economy by creating modern accommodation for companies' current and future needs. We still need that. If their price point isn't right, and they haven't by any stretch demonstrated that there is no requirement for this space or insufficient interest, then I would hope that we will allow this to continue in the planning permission that is given for, and that the retail in Billingshurst won't be jeopardised in the way that has been well explained to many people. Thank you.
Thank you.
This
site
was originally given specifically because of the employment benefits it offered. It wouldn't have had permission otherwise, because it otherwise wouldn't have met the criteria in the plan. The reason that it got that permission is because we specifically have policies for employment sites in our local plan, and the reason that they are so carefully put in there is that providing sites for employment use is not necessarily as lucrative per square metre as providing sites for housing and retail. And we do see again and again cases where there are sites that are allocated for employment use that over time, before they've been built out, get turned over to retail or to housing. And this is what appears to be happening here, because as explained, it's not being shown that there is no prospect of employment use here. The fact that there is an easy way to get retail in is not the same as no market for employment use. And that's why this is part of the policy, and that's why it's so important. It's about preserving our retail structures for both Billingshurst and Horsham. And it's also about something we've heard a lot about this evening. It's about having sustainable local communities. And if we can get employment locally, that is incredibly valuable. And also it's about having a greener way of living by putting these large retail units in places that are on the edge of areas which have a very high catchment within a short distance. Now, as Councillor Bateman said, if I lived in Billingshurst, I would probably shed a passing tear for not being able to go to the range, because it's, by all accounts, is a really good shop. But the balance of where a shop like that should be and which members of the public it makes most sense to put that kind of shop closest to matters, and the balance of the harms of putting a shop like that in the wrong place also matters. So I'm minded to support the recommendation of the officers.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, thank you, Chairman. This is really bad news. I'm agreeing with Councillor Fletcher to a certain extent, which is really quite dramatic for me, but never mind. Having as cabinet member been responsible for part of the drafting of these policies, I mean, I would agree that one has to support this sort of employment use. When I was cabinet member for economic development, basically our local industrial areas were 99% full. A lot of them were old and decrepit and needed renewing. I think that still expands to this day, and we needed that sort of planning, that sort of space. Having said that, I could add that in Billingshurst there is another site that could be built out, which is the Flats Roundabout, which is empty. It's just got a co-op that sells cheap gasoline. So there is an alternative in Billingshurst for other things. What I found particularly interesting from the comments of the speakers, and I think there's a lesson here maybe for our officers to think about, is that the traffic counts originally predicated when we passed the original planning permission gave a certain number. And the reality today is that that higher fall, if you want to call it that, because footfall doesn't apply, really indicates that there seems to be a problem with the way we measure the traffic. Now, the officer actually said that the TRIX data has a maximum and minimum, and of course, statistically speaking, you have to examine the data and you have to examine how it is used. So you might have a range of traffic which has a minimum and maximum. But basically, you're running at the maximum all the time. There seems to be something wrong, and I would have argued one of the things that we should have insisted county highways did was to do a traffic count at the time to get the data to back up. Because I read the report and I just don't believe the number of trips that is being in there. So I think I'm in the same direction as Councillor Fletcher, possibly for the same reasons and different reasons. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Just reference to the other site in Billingshurst, so we're aware that there is a reserve matters application currently on the Flats Roundabout indicating that's progressed.
Okay. Comments?
It was really just to pick up on the traffic point again, because I did ask the officers earlier, because we'd discussed this run up to the meeting, and as with Councillor Clark and the member of the public, there is some concern about the robustness of these traffic counts, and really my question is that whether, notwithstanding West Sussex Highways confidence that even if you have the site fully built out with retail, the roundabout would still operate at within capacity. I'm not confident that we've got the data that proves that. So the suggestion was that would it cause a problem for our case if we were to vote in favour of the officer's recommendation, but with an additional reason of refusal that there is insufficient information to give us confidence about the traffic counts.
I think the difficulty is, Councillor Fletcher, is we did send County Highways the concerns raised by third parties that we've heard today. So they have considered that, and obviously then responded with the view that they still consider it's acceptable. So I think we have back in that respect. I think it's a difficult one because we've got no real evidence that there is an issue, and I think it's just that we think there might be. So, but obviously we do have an evidence base, including the technical details submitted as well as the county highway engineer's comments that it is acceptable. So ultimately it's your decision, members, but I think there's difficulty here because we don't even have anything to suggest that it's not okay other than a personal view.
The reason that I ask, and I understand why this is difficult, is that if we are to vote to refuse this application and there were to be an appeal against us, I wouldn't want us to be unnecessarily hamstrung by effectively having accepted the traffic counts over which we think that there is it would be justified to do further work.
And that's your decision. I think I've expressed my view that I think it's a difficult one to add because we've not really got anything to substantiate that. And ultimately, if the applicant, if this application is refused and the applicant chooses to go to appeal, the inspector would still consider third-party representation. You're right; it may well be a reason for us to add more, and something for you to consider, members. But the inspector would consider all comments received as part of the planning application and those submitted as part of any appeal. So the inspector is not limited to just consider the matters in which the council considers it unacceptable. But that's the view, though. Members, thank you.
Mr. Clark. Councillor Clark. Yeah, this is very much about us providing evidence. At the moment, listening to this debate and being a numbers man myself, as you know well, basically looking at the evidence in this report, you haven't established the baseline at which you're starting from. And I think what Ruth and I were saying is that to be able to judge whether the county highways have made a cogent and coherent response, they've looked at an aspect of it, but they haven't established the baseline. And if you don't establish the baseline by conducting traffic counts today, over a period of time like today, you don't actually know that with passing this planning application that it would not add damaging stress to that road system around there. Already the road system around that area is under stress, particularly in the rush hour, like today. Basically, the traffic was backed up from up that area all the way down to the roundabout at Platt roundabout. So already the traffic there at times is quite severely impacted. I think if we turn it down, one of the times we should turn it down is to challenge county highways and say, we don't have the evidence to prove that it would not be a severe impact to the local highway. I think that's important.
Councillor Clark, do you want to put forward an alternative motion on this? Or Councillor Fletcher?
I think it might be the wording to use is that there is insufficient information. So I want to make this that it doesn't weaken any refusal put forward. So I am still looking to the Office for sort of a level of reassurance there, because I wouldn't want us to make ourselves in a worse position by putting this forward. But as Councillor Clark says, given that there is a discrepancy, an apparent discrepancy between the previously calculated figures and the current actual figures, which should now be the baseline, I think it is reasonable to say that we're not confident that we've got sufficient information. So I would put forward an alternative motion with an additional reason for refusal of insufficient information about the traffic projections.
It would generally be around it's not been demonstrated. So I think your view would be it's not been demonstrated, but ultimately your view would have to be it's not been demonstrated that the proposal would not result in a significant adverse impact on the public highway. But ultimately that would have to be your view. Obviously you need to bear in mind that the site already has a consented scheme with reserve matters. Obviously that was the B class unit, so acknowledge there is a slight increase here, but obviously there is a baseline there. So obviously you would have to be of the view that that difference between the consented scheme and what is now an A1 could result in an adverse impact, and therefore your view is that's not been demonstrated. So yeah, just mindful of it's only that the act really, because there's already permission for a unit on the site of a similar scale. It's just it didn't include retail at that point.
Yes, I think that's correct. We're not saying that there will be a problem. We're saying it hasn't been demonstrated that there won't be a problem. And I'm happy to go with your word. It's not been demonstrated.
Just the motion proposes that it's not been demonstrated that the proposal would not have an adverse impact on highways capacity. Are you comfortable with that?
I think you might have to say it's not been demonstrated there would not be a severe cumulative residual impact. But if the officers disagree, then I'll take their advice on that.
Just to say, Councillor Fletcher, obviously it's your wording, but I do recognise that is the wording of the MPPF. So yeah,
in that case, let's use that, because we're not rejecting it because there would be an impact. Of course, there will be an impact on the highways.
Just clarifying a point on the MPP. Mr. Clark.
I'm sure that if it did go to appeal, then an inspector would be listening to this debate. So if nothing else, I mean, the inspector would be at least aware of what the intention behind it.
Mr. Trollope, sorry.
Could it instead just be sort of like an advisory, like PS redone?
No. Unfortunately not, Councillor Trollope.
Well, you know, trying to be creative and not solutionizing.
We're going to have a short break so that Councillor Fletcher and Clark could put together Councillor Fletcher, sorry.
Apologies, everybody.
The proposed. So I put them together, the motion. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. We are adding a further reason for refusal to the existing reasons for refusal, and that additional reason will be read by the officer.
Thank you, Chairman. So the motion put forward by Councillor Fletcher is: it has not been demonstrated that the proposed development would not have a severe residual cumulative impact on the road network following mitigation. So that's a proposed additional reason put forward by Councillor Fletcher. Thank you.
Okay, with that, okay. With that additional reason, we'd like to go to the vote on this. Sorry, apologies. Seconder, please, on that one. Thank you. And all those in favour of this amended motion? We've added a motion sorry, let me start again. We have added another reason for failure, for refusal of this particular application, and that was read out by the officer. Do you want to read it again? Of all members clear? We're voting on the reason for refusal stated. It's additional reason for refusal. Is everyone clear? Yeah. Okay. So all those for refusal of the planning application, please show. Okay.
14.
All those against? Okay. Any abstention? Thank you. Therefore, the application has been refused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I put my microphone on, apologies. Moving on to DC 24-0635, Rye Island, Hollands Lane, Henfield. Please could the officer make that presentation?
Thank you, Chairman. The application site comprises a former group of agricultural barns and a yard area located along an access track about 650 metres south of the built-up area boundary of Henfield. The host dwelling is a Grade 2 listed building called Rye Farm, which lies to the east of the application site. There's previous permissions in 1992 and 97 which allowed for open storage of machinery for the farm's use within the yard area. This is a site in context, showing the network of public rights of way nearby, the listed buildings which are in yellow, and the host dwelling, which is also a listed building, and the built-up area of Henfield, which is to the north and the black dotted line. The application site forms a collection of linked barns and structures which are in an L shape and they're connected by a gravel yard, which includes a number of shipping containers, storage containers, and a static caravan within the western side of the yard. And some photos of the yard as it exists at the moment. The application seeks planning permission to formalise the use of the yard and buildings for the applicant's two businesses and the siting of storage containers and the caravan within the yard, which would also be for the business use. The first business is an events and wedding business, which hires out tents, marquees, props, furniture. And the second business comprises the storage, maintenance and hiring out of historic military vehicles for events and TV film use. The application is retrospective in nature and is understood to have been operating since around the end of 2015. Following refusal of the previous application on the site in November 2021 for the proposed business use, which included storage, workshop and office, on the grounds of the use being considered inappropriate for a rural area and given a lack of water neutral position being demonstrated, the enforcement notice was served in January 2022, requiring the cessation or use of land and buildings for business and storage purposes, along with the removal of fixtures and fittings. The enforcement notice gave a 6-month period to comply. The enforcement notice was appealed at the start of February 2022, with a decision issued by PINS in September 2023. Although the appeal was dismissed and the enforcement notice was upheld, giving a 6-month period to comply with the notice requirements, regard is to be had that the appeal inspector's view on the use of the site was that it contributed to the sustainable rural economic development of the area, along with the use concentrated within existing buildings on the site. The appeal was dismissed, but only on water neutrality grounds, as the inspector found water neutrality evidence unclear, therefore not rule out an adverse impact. Since the appeal, the applicants no longer clean the marquees and tents on site and instead engage the services of a cleaning company, Stretch and Tents, who offer a specialist cleaning and drying service based in Norbiton, Kingston. There are only 2 staff on site, who are the applicants, and they use the existing facilities at their house at Rye Farm. The limited visitors delivery drivers have access to a composting WC installed on the site. There's no mains connection, no mains water connection. Officers and Natural England are therefore satisfied that the proposal, along with the suggested planning conditions, will secure an appropriate use of the site and will achieve a water neutral position. And therefore, the application is being recommended for approval, subject to the conditions shown, including condition 6, which precludes the washing of tents on the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alexander, and thank you for your patience. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Council members, and good evening. It's really just to say hi and just to reiterate that the use is actually very, very low. For the wedding side of it, for the clients to come in, there's literally 2 a month. We actually find it's actually very good as a way to actually be able to actually not have people come down to do video presentations, but maybe you can do a walk around inside. So that's actually cutting down quite a bit on that. But as I said, it's literally two visits a month. I wish my military vehicle business was actually a business, because the renting out side of things is actually very sparse and far between on that side of things. And essentially, we are really retaining old farm buildings. We wouldn't have a use for them otherwise. We've had to do quite a lot of maintenance on them to keep them watertight, etc., and also standing. They were in a pretty bad condition when we arrived there. They were virtually falling down, and we've made them safe, secure, and tidied up what was actually a fairly messy site. I actually spent 3 weeks jet washing about 2 foot of mud out of all of them, I think that's pretty much all I have to say on it. And thank you very much to the planning officers all involved for working with us and for their approval on that. Thank you very much indeed. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to invite board member Councillor Perry to open the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself in a complex situation here, actually. This site really matters in Henfield. It's a lovely natural area, part of the nature recovery area of the Ada. Lots of birds around, walkers love it, lots of lovely rural views. But I also recognise the value of the successful rural businesses which want the site and would want to be supportive of that if possible. But I'm aware, as the local district councillor, of a great deal of concern locally, and people cited their comments online that you'll have seen. They're worried about the flooded roadway, the access road quality, the water strategy they're concerned about, the noise and hours of operation, and the untidiness of the storage containers next to the listed farmhouse, just to say some of them. Now, I get a bit uncomfortable about this because I think that the locals' responses are really about all the businesses operating on the wider site. So if you notice back in those pictures, there was a blue, the blue bit, which is where we understand, and locals tell me it's happened, so it's events happening through the summer, festivals and such like. And if this were to be true, then it would mean that some of the advice from the officers, like the West Essex Highways assumption about 2 clients per month, might not entirely be true because there could be an awful lot of traffic for the festival or wedding type things. The assertion about no marquees on the site might be wrong, and the issues of the time operation of the site might also be rather compromised. So I can see where the locals are coming from. I also know we're only looking at this bit within the red. So I'm finding it difficult to know how to sort of vote really. I would appreciate any thoughts that come from the discussion, but hopefully, if the motion were to be passed, if it was passed, we could be thinking of conditions on screening, possibly a restriction on number of shipping containers added, if there were to be any added. A little bit more transparency on the water could still be done, given that there could be other uses, water on the site adjacent, and the 2 businesses must be connected in some way. And the opening hours as well is something that I think is slightly confusing, given just talking about the storage. So I'm finding myself very conflicted, and I'd be interested in the conversations that happen next.
Thank you.
Just quickly, you're right, Councillor Perry, we are considering what's within the red edge rather than anything else. Obviously, we do need to recognise pieces of the plan generally have permitted development rights for events, but that's not what we're considering today. This is the courtyard complex here. I think that there are a few things just to bear in mind. Obviously, the inspector considered the development acceptable by water neutrality, and that's a significant material consideration. Obviously, most of the screening comes from the buildings itself, and I'm assuming the red edge is relatively tight around the building. So I think the need and ability to provide any screening, I think, are quite limited because of that. In terms of number of shipping containers, obviously, we're only, if members grant today, we're only granting what's there. If any more come there, then that should be, require planning permission and can be investigated as a breach of planning control. So I think you can't put conditions to limit something that requires consent in its own right, and it's not, so that's just a response to that.
None could be added without further planning permission being sought.
Likely, what I would caveat that, obviously, if it doesn't need planning permission, we'd have to investigate whether it needs it or not. If it doesn't need it, you can't condition it. Either way, you can't condition it. So it either needs permission or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you can't condition something that is not a development. And if it is development, it requires planning permission. Yeah, I know that's not exactly what you wanted.
Not entirely.
But
those pictures don't really show shipping containers, which I believe are sort of stacked up. I wonder whether more could be added or taken away. But this is, I'm really just reflecting local people's concern.
And just commenting on hours of operation, I don't believe a condition is imposed. I think we just need to be mindful and about restrictions on businesses. It is a relatively low-key business. business, it's does it need it, or if members really do want to consider that, you just don't want to be restricting a business that then prohibits its ability to operate. So I think that's something members can consider, but I don't necessarily think it's necessary in all cases, and obviously in this instance we're not recommending one. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher. Sorry.
I'm really confused because I'm not sure what the business is. How can you only have 2 visitors a month with all of that large area? There must be lorries coming in and delivering, or I don't really understand that function of the business. It can't be an online marquee account without vehicles coming in and out to deliver them and bring them back.
From my understanding of this case, is it hires out marquees to weddings and events, so they all get packed off and chipped out, and then they.
So there are
arrive
lorries
back.
coming to pick them up and take them out. So they counted in those 2 visits per
The
month?
2 visits, or the 2 visits are, I guess, people coming to the site to visit and to look at the.
So what's the lorry this like?
Give me, I haven't. I'll see if I can find out from the.
It'll be useful because I think that's really important. Thank you.
Harry, turn your microphone off. Thank you. It's okay. Councillor Fletcher.
It seems to me that this is probably a fairly straightforward application, but I just wanted to ask the officer to look at regulatory condition 4, because that does seem to condition hours of operation.
Sorry, can I just clarify the query on condition 4, please? There is one.
I think I thought I heard the officer say that there wasn't a condition, and I think there is.
There is, you're right. Yes,
I don't have a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Traffic movements. Any other? Councillor Menton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just reading through the outcome consultations here, I noted 3.5 that the West Sussex Fire and Rescue comment on the distance of a fire hydrant for firefighting being 755 metres further than the 90-metre distance required for a commercial premises. Could the officers just enlighten me on how this matter has been met?
On larger sites, there would normally be a condition to require compliance with the relevant fire hydrant requirements. So it would be a regulatory condition to require the applicants to comply with the relevant criteria. But I'm not sure if one's put on here, so having a look. There is.
Well, sorry, I was just looking for lorry movement. In terms of that, I think it's a difficult one. I think if it's covered by building regulations, then that would cover that. But we have to recognise when you're talking about buildings where people don't go into, and if they're already there, it probably doesn't need building regulations. So therefore, your question is: do you put planning condition on to require it? But then you do need to be mindful that the buildings are existing. Okay, this is a change of use, but the buildings themselves are there already. And it's a relatively small scale use. So what would the cost be to do that? And is that reasonable? So I think you have to weigh up those points. And I think the officers obviously have decided to not impose that, but that's a decision that rests with members. I think it's when you've got a relatively small scale use, I'm not entirely sure whether that would be required to make the development acceptable.
So it's actually a requirement that does not need to be met.
It would be a matter of judgment to Councillor Manton, and officers in this instance have not considered it reasonable and necessary.
Okay. Any other? Oh, yeah, sorry, Councillor Clark.
Going back to my hobby horses again, looking at the horse neutrality statement, which is one of the briefest I've ever seen in my life, just to confirm that the tents will be sent off to some place in Norbiton or somewhere to be washed, and basically your condition 6, I think it is. Yeah, 6 covers that one. But if people are coming on site using the toilets and the water in the house, presumably we're going to ignore that, are we? I mean, I think we've ignored it before. I just want to clarify it, really.
The applicants live on at the host dwelling, but there is a composting toilet within the yard area, which has no mains water.
Thank you.
Councillor Perry.
It's a question really about the marquee as well. What about the vehicle auction? Does that all have to happen off site now? Thinking back to auctioning, or is that something that we aren't worried about?
I think condition 6 includes vehicle washing as well. No part of the site hereby permitted shall be designated, equipped, or used as a vehicle or washing area without the prior written consent of the local planning authority.
Has to happen elsewhere.
Just to say, in response to the lorry movement question, I can't find a specific transport statement submitted in support of this proposal. It may well be something within the design and access statement, but obviously it's tricky to just go through all that here. I have looked at the county highways comments, and whilst they're not specific about the level of traffic movements, you know, and there's 2 things. The inspector considered the use acceptable, so essentially that level of use and traffic movements associated has already been considered acceptable by a planning inspectorate. But secondly, obviously the tests in terms of the MPPF are, you know, is there a cumulative impact? You know, you heard the reason for refusal on the previous scheme. You know, there has to be a severe cumulative impact or an impact on highway safety. And obviously and you know, there's not just a couple of lines from the county highway engineer, there's a fair few paragraphs, and they do go into the details of the business and consider the proposal acceptable. So whilst I can't see a set figure jumping out at me, you know, it is a relatively detailed assessment, and they obviously have considered the proposal meets that test within the MPPF. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher, yes.
Just looking online, I'd like to quote from the website. No matter the festivals and their key parties have brought delight and wonder to hundreds of house celebrations. And basically talked about how they've got all over the world. Now, I don't understand it. To hear what the residents are saying about the impact on the rural environment of really a very large business. It says it's the largest UK supplier of marquees on their own website. That's the kind of thing we need to know about without having to do research ourselves, I think, in terms of what's going in the report. So I think it's really concerning if we don't know what the lorry is.
No, sorry, you're not allowed to engage with the members. No, sorry, you're not allowed to engage with the members. Thank you.
I can't answer, you know, obviously off the hook here now. I don't have that information to hand, and we've been looking at details on file, and I can't see them. It's not to say they're not there, but when a detailed question raised, which you don't have in advance, you're not necessarily able to respond to. But obviously we have to recognise that the Imperial Inspector has considered it acceptable in all respects except water neutrality. So recognise what you're saying, Councillor, and I think there are measures around hours of operation, things like that, which are proposed. I apologise for that. That would manage that, but ultimately the use has been considered to be acceptable. So I'm not sure, even if we had that figure, what that would achieve, because ultimately inspectors already considered that use acceptable. But you know, I apologise, we don't have that information before us today.
Councillor Fisher.
Can I make a proposal that we delay determination on this so we have the further information that we need to make a decision?
Is the decision member?
I go back once again to the reasonableness of decision making. That if we fly in the face of an inspector's decision that has been considered previously and found to go a certain way, then we are straying into unreasonable behaviour, and that has serious consequences for appeals, because it is almost impossible that a second inspector would overturn the findings of the first, and we would be charged handsomely for the privilege.
Councillor Perry, sorry.
There's an artificial separation here between the small site, which I understand the inspectors consider, and the 2 movements per roadway. All of that is right, but in reality, it is a much bigger thing. The inspector has made the legal decisions based on only part of the story, and that's what I feel we're getting now. And why I would be happy with Councillor Fisher's suggestion.
Just to recognise Councillor Perry in terms of that, obviously you acknowledged earlier on that there might be wider issues within the site, but obviously we are just looking at the red edge here. So I think in any deferral, that needs to be considered. We are just we're not looking at the wider site here, but we're looking at the red edge, and that's on the basis that the inspector considered acceptable. I just to make sure everybody's aware of what we are considering.
Councillor Vanderbilt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is a functioning business. The parties and the this and that and the other that are going on in the fields, that could be happening if the business was run out of an alternative legitimate site. So we're not changing anything. What we're doing is giving these guys a legitimate opportunity to carry on doing what they're already doing. If they move in Henfield Village and decide to operate from there, then that external stuff will still be going on. I don't think you're going to change that by denying them the right to operate here.
Councillor Bainham, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Emma's probably said it out already, but this has been through a process. It's been through an appeal. The appeal failed, but it only failed on one count, and that was the one count of water neutrality. Now, if we are satisfied that that water neutrality issue has been sufficiently covered now, then I don't see we've got any grounds to refuse it.
Any comments? Councillor Fisher, you are proposing a motion there. Do you wish to continue with that proposal, having heard what's been said by the...
So what I'm proposing is that we defer a decision, not refuse it, till we have the information that's necessary. That's what I'm suggesting.
Chair, it begs the question, what do we need this information for? Why would that inform the question of water neutrality?
Well, local people, I'm not able to say this is definitely true, but local people tell me there are festivals going on that site that must be more water would be suggested by just this small bit of it, and therefore the inspector not have a full picture when they were talking about their water neutrality and other things in their decision.
Councillor Perry, you're talking about the land in blue? Yes, is that what you're referring? So just to be clear, we're not considering that. That is not a material consideration of this planning application, and to do so would be unreasonable. You have to consider the water use of this site alone and the proposal for the description of development as proposed. If something's happening on that wider site, then that can be investigated as part of a potential breach of planning control, but it is not material to this planning application for you.
Thank you for saying that. I do understand that. I just feel the two are interconnected, and it is not my intention to stop this business operating. I just want it to be done the right way to protect water in the area.
I'll come back to Councillor Fisher. You've heard from the lawyers, you've heard from the officers, and the officers. You were proposing a condition, a deferral of this. Is that for further information on traffic movements? Was that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yes, I cannot believe. I mean, I think it's really important that when we have planning applications coming to us, that they give all the facts of the decision made on those facts. And it doesn't make sense. You know, I've run many businesses. You need a lot of deliveries and you need a lot of taking away of things in order to run your business. So I'm, thinking about the impact that has on the rural community.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Chair, if I might clarify how that impacts on water neutrality, which is what the main issue of this should be, because we've boiled down the issues. They were boiled down in an appeal, and that is the one that remains. And it's really for the applicant to make out now that that's been resolved. This is opening up seams that really we shouldn't be considering here.
Okay, thank you.
You need a second of that motion.
Yeah, I'm not bringing it forward because it's taking invoice.
Therefore, I will go to the recommendation to approve planning commission subject to appropriate conditions noted in the committee report. All those in those four? Those against? Abstentions? Okay, therefore the application has been approved. Okay. Moving on to urgent business, I have none. So I'd like to thank the officers for their presentations, the comprehensive committee report we've received today, and their contributions this evening. I'd also like to thank the members for their contributions as well. And I wish you all a safe journey home. And at 20:58, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.